everybody, today we're going to use Venn diagrams to visualize probability. Venn diagrams use circles to represent sets. For probability, we can think of the circles as events in our sample space. We first start by drawing a rectangle. The rectangle represents the experiment, so everything that can occur in the sample space should be inside this box. Once we have our box, we can start adding in our circles. So our first circle represents the probability of an event A occurring. I want you to see that we now have two things represented inside the box. We have everything inside the circle, which is the probability of A occurring, but we also have everything outside of the circle, which is the probability of A not happening, which we call A complement. Let's take a quick example. Say I was given that the probability of A is 0.6. I would put 0.6 inside of my circle. Then the probability of A not happening would be 1 minus 0.6, which is 0.4. We want to remember that we're dealing with probability, so everything has to add up to 1 or 100% when we fill in the box. When we add a second circle, we want to pay attention to where the circles overlap. Where the circles overlap is the probability of both events occurring, and when possible, this is where we want to start putting in numbers. This is where we will have the probability of A and B. Once we put in that number, we can work our way out, and I really want you to think about subtraction as you put in the other numbers. Let's try this example. A social media platform conducts a study of its users. It finds 65% are women, 48% are 35 or younger, and 36% are women that are 35 or younger. The first thing you should notice is that 65%, 48%, and 36% together adds up to more than 100. So we do have overlap in our events. So before we do our box, let's define some variables. We're going to let W be the event that the user is a woman, and I'm going to write less than or equal to 35 as the event that a user is 35 or younger. I want to keep my variables really simple so that when I look at my Venn diagram, it's really clear to me what everything stands for. So I'll draw my box, I'll put in my two events, probability of W and probability being less than or equal to 35. Now we're ready to look at the numbers. I want to start with the overlapping area, which represents probability of being a woman and less than or equal to 35. We can see in the problem that that's 36%. I'm going to write 0.36. Now I'm going to work my way out, and remember I said we're going to subtract as we go. So let's look at the probability of being a woman. We said that was 65%. We already have 36% in our circle. That means we want to subtract 0.36 from 0.65 to get 0.29. Remember, the entire circle should add up to 0.65, so subtract as we go. Now we're ready to look at the probability of being less than or equal to 35. Altogether, that's supposed to be 48%. We already have our 36%, so we'll have 0.48 minus 0.36. That works out to 0.12. Now we need to look at the outside part. So what's outside of W, what's outside of less than or equal to 35. To start, we'll add up the 0.29, 0.36, and 0.12 that we already have. That's a total of 0.77. So what's left over is 1 minus 0.77, which is 0.23. Now if I add up 0.29, 0.36, 0.12, and 0.23, we get 1. So all the social media platform users are represented in this box. Our first question says, find the probability a randomly selected platform user is a male 35 or younger. So we know we need to be inside the 35 or younger circle, but we don't want to be in the part that intersects women. That means we're only looking at this 0.12 that's 35 or younger, but not a woman. So our first answer is 0.12 or 12%. Our second question says, find the probability that a randomly selected platform user is a woman over 35 years old. So we know where to start. We want to start in the circle that's probability of women, but we don't want to use the part that's less than or equal to 35, so we're only looking at this little part, which says 0.29. So our second answer is 0.29 or 29%. Our next question says, find the probability that a randomly selected platform user is a man over 35 years old. So this time, we're not looking at the women's circle. We're not looking at the less than or equal to 35 circle. The only thing we have left here is the 0.23, which is our final answer. Let's try looking at some conditional probabilities to wrap this up. So here, we're going to find the probability a randomly selected platform user is a woman given that they are 35 or younger. Let's think back to conditional probability. We're trying to find probability someone's a woman given they're less than or equal to 35. That means we want to know the probability someone's a woman and less than or equal to 35. Then we're going to divide by the probability of being less than or equal to 35. So we know our numerator. Probability of W and less than or equal to 35 is this 0.36 that's in our intersection. Then the probability of being less than or equal to 35 is this whole circle, which is 0.48. So we have 0.36 over 0.48, which reduces nicely to 0.75. Let's do one more. Let's find the probability a randomly selected platform user is 35 or younger, given they are not a woman. So again, let's write down what we're trying to do. We're trying to find the probability of being less than or equal to 35 given you're not a woman. That means we need the probability of not being a woman and being less than or equal to 35 over the probability the customer was not a woman. So not a woman and less than or equal to 35 is this 0.12 over on the right. The probability of not being a woman, well, that's everything outside the W circle, the 0.23 and the 0.12, which adds up to 0.35. So we have 0.12 over 0.35, which doesn't come out as pretty this time, but I'm going to round it to 0.3429. So as you're doing these problems, remember to start slow, draw your Venn diagram, fill out every piece of the Venn diagram before you start trying to answer the questions. And just because these questions involve a Venn diagram doesn't change the formulas we've been using all along for probabilities. Write things out, take your time so that you get the questions correct.